And for a deeper discussion on today's inflation report, I spoke to the president of the National Taxpayers Union, Peter Sepp. I asked him if there is a way to beat inflation without beating the consumer at the same time. All right, Pete, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. CPI inflation report out today seems to be good news, right? Down for the month, slowed as well on a year-over-year basis. Tell us, is the consumer in a better shape now?
Consumers may be seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, but the tunnel is still pretty long here, and there could be a lot of obstacles on the way. We have, for example, lower gasoline prices, but those could be headed up thanks to problems in hurricane season, the fact that the heat wave is interrupting refinery supplies, the fact that you still have bad government policies driving up housing costs. Those could all contribute to inflation. There's plenty going on in the economy that gives us pause here to say, let's keep the champagne on ice.
Well, let's talk about a little bit on consumer spending here. Would you say that slowing down a bit? We've seen some indicators of consumer spending slowing down. Do you think that has contributed to inflation coming down?
Oh, yes, definitely. And the important thing here is to figure out what the cause is. Are folks pulling back because their budgets are simply getting tighter? Are they pulling back because the sugar high of all that government stimulus during the COVID era has finally worn off? Those are important questions that we have to answer, because if we don't know, going forward, we could make some very serious policy errors. The federal government, for example, could simply write more checks or create more subsidies for housing that could make the problem worse instead of focusing on the core issues, which is just leaving that money in the pockets of people who earned it in the first place.
Would the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates provide relief to the economy?
Quite possibly. It's important to remember, though, there are already concerns among some in Washington that if the Fed moves too quickly, such as lowering interest rates in September, that could be taken as a sign that there's election influence going on. And we certainly don't want to see that. I'm sure Chairman Powell at the Fed doesn't want to create that appearance either.
How strong is this concern in Powell's mind, in that if he does in fact cut rates in September, that he's worried that it may appear he's supporting a candidate over another?
I imagine that Chairman Powell does have that concern. After all, the Federal Reserve tries to pride itself on being above the political fray. This could very well seem, either way, to be entering that fray.
So then your belief is because of this, rate cuts will be delayed?
It's quite possible that they will be delayed.
All right. So if we do get a rate cut, then you would say it would be after the election, maybe in November and December. Would that be a good guess?
I think it's likelier that it would be after the election. I may be proven wrong, but I think the political pressure here is pretty strong.
All right. So what do we need to do in order for inflation to go down, but not at the same time squeezing consumers?
Yeah, the Fed can play a role here, a very big one, but it can't only be the role player here. Policymakers need to pull levers as well. Governments need to respond to the pressures that they have created on inflation. In housing, that means at the local level, get rid of permitting laws that prevent housing from being built in the first place. Cut back on property taxes, which are by far the biggest contributor to housing and closing costs. With taxes, you've got to be able to help people afford their daily living expenses by letting them keep more of their own money. It's pretty simple, but it seems to elude governments at all levels.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today, Pete.
My pleasure.